This podcast wouldn't be possible without the support of our title sponsor, Manulife, and today's presenting sponsor, BDC. BDC Small Business Week is October 20th to 26th, and it's an annual celebration of entrepreneurship that BDC has organized for over 45 years. So in that spirit, I'm excited to introduce today's guest on the Behind the Business podcast. Joining me is Pierre Cleroux, Vice President Research and Chief Economist at BDC. Thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.
Well, and your day job, you're in Montreal and Ottawa most of your time. I thank you for coming to Waterloo region to be with us today. And you've spoken before at some events that we've hosted, so it's great to have you back in Waterloo region. I was joking before we went on, said it is the center of the universe, but it is great to have you here because Waterloo region has a lot going for it in our humble opinion here. But let's start with before we dive into that. Let's talk about your background. Some people will recognize you, others may not. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up with BDC.
Well, I'm an economist by training, so I have a BA and a master's degree in economics, but also I did an MBA just to better understand the business world. After that, I worked in different organizations, always as an economist, responsible to look at small business policy. I was the Deputy Minister for the Quebec government, looking at what we can do for small business. And I've been at BDC for 12 years. I'm a VP Research and Chief Economist. So I have a team looking at the economy, helping the organization to understand where the economy is going. And we also try to help businesses to understand not only where the economy is going in the next few months, but also bigger trends in the next 5 years, 10 years.
Now, you're chief economist for the banks and other organizations. Are consulted by the federal government, finance minister, the provincial finance ministers, to give what they say is the consensus view of where the economy is going. How often do you have to be involved in meetings? Because the budget basically is a 12-month a year. It happens all the time.
Yes.
From a government budget perspective.
You're perfectly right. We do a lot of research with small business, so we are talking to the different government to explain our vision, our view about how the economy is performing and what is the situation for small business. For example, we did the research with the Bank of Canada last year to understand the impact of higher interest rate on small business.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things which was, we'll talk a little bit about COVID, not COVID's proper, but the impacts of COVID. One of the things that I think Small Business Week is so important to do for, aside from BDC, because you know who your customers are, and the vast majority of business in this country are small business. So, here in our chamber, probably 45% have 20 employees or 15 employees or less. 60% would have 25 or 30 or less. It's almost 87% that have 50 employees or less. But that's not different from any other community across the country. That's what the business makeup looks like. Why is it so important? And part of your mandate is to help facilitate it as a complementary lender. You're not a chartered big bank, but you're complementary to support small business. That's part of that core mandate. Talk about why it's so important for BDC to support small business.
I would say there's two reasons. The first one is, like you said, small business is very important for the economy. They are creating jobs. They are responsible for a lot of innovation. Mm-hmm. Startups, when you create a new business, it's because you have something different to sell, and that is helping the economy. So that's the first reason. It's because small business is so important for the economy. The second reason is because there's a market gap in terms of small business financing. So we take more risk than private financial institutions. That's our mandate, to support small business in their growth project. So we help businesses from the day one, from startup to the end of their life when they decide it's time to make a transition. We help them in two ways. We have a lot of different tools for financing, but we also have an advisory services group that is helping business to improve their efficiency, choose the right technology for them, So we really have a package for helping small business in all the operation they have.
So let's talk about on the consulting side. Like you have a wide variety of consulting services that are either low or no cost. Certainly, it's very affordable for business. So whether it's maximizing your financials to creating what are the new efficiencies and investments in machinery, etc. I mean, you have consultants that will come in and help on very specific things for that small and medium sized business, so that they can figure out what's next, and then kind of bring to bear, what are some of the financial tools, and again, your lending profile is a lot different than a big bank. Like you have more risk tolerance because that's the mandate of BDC.
We take more risks, but we're also more patient.
Mm-hmm.
So we're there for the good time, but also for the more difficult time. We are also much more flexible than the private sector. So our mandate, because we're a crown corporation, is not to make profit; is really to support businesses. So we don't give subsidies. All our tools are loans, but because of our mandate, we are able to be more flexible, more patient. We try to really answer to the demand of small business in Canada.
And some of the things that the BDC will lend are things that you may not find a big bank doing. As an example, buying an actual bricks and mortar, buying a facility, financing some of those things that are more difficult if you're going traditional lenders. One of the things that is interesting. I mean, you have more risk tolerance. You have a longer view. Your mandate is to support small business. But your track record of success and financials is pretty extraordinary, given the risk profile that you have.
Well, it's because there's a lot of success among small business. So yes, they represent maybe more risk, but it doesn't mean that they're not performing well. You're perfectly right. Our loss is very low because we work with small business, and a lot of small business are performing very well. Even during the pandemic, where we helped a lot of small business, we tripled our number of loans during the pandemic. And, our loss were very small because small businesses have been very resilient. A lot of them changed their business model to be successful despite the difficulty of the pandemic. So that's why we're successful, is we work with small business, and they are performing quite well.
As a good segue, the theme of this year's BDC Small Business Week is the power of small, defying the odds. And although, and you're right, small businesses, and I must admit, I think there was a view from many of us that work with business organizations. We didn't know what to expect during the pandemic. How many were going to go out of business? We're going to be able to hold on. I think everyone working together, from federal and provincial, municipal governments, finance, lenders, all the variety of programs. I think people can around the margins talk about how there was some inefficiency, but on the whole, it was pretty well in a fire drill situation. It was pretty well run, and BDC was part of that.
But the chamber was part of that as well.
Absolutely,
the role of the chamber was key during the pandemic to help business, and also to make the link between business and small business.
Well, it helps having 450 chambers across the country, like here in Kitchener-Waterloo, but 450 chambers there's always a chamber in a community, and that grassroots was pretty important. But let's talk about, you mentioned COVID. I think businesses have been resilient. Many businesses were, especially in retail, food, hospitality, first to close, last to open, hardest hit. So the impact of COVID, there's still a bit of a hangover. I think on the whole, doing well. But interest rates were, one of the byproducts that's been very difficult on people. But, rising interest rate, labor shortages, and then a surplus, and now back to some shortages. Input costs have been rising because of inflation. How do you feel that all ties back to the theme, which is defying the odds and the power of small, and the resilience that small business demonstrate and will continue to demonstrate?
Well, what we wanted to do is to give small business an idea about the future business environment. So we look at how the next 5 years is going to look like. First is the good news. Interest rates are starting to decline. Inflation is now at 2%. There's no reason to keep interest rates elevated. So we believe the Bank of Canada will continue to reduce interest rate, and in the next 12 months, we should have a prime rate around 2.5%.
And that's good news for every small business that has an operating loan, that has business loans, frankly, for every consumer who has a mortgage or financing a car or a big purchase.
Definitely, and that means also more demand for most small business. So that's a good news. However, there will be still challenges, and we have identified 3 challenges that are going to remain. You mentioned a higher cost of doing business. Cost has been really increasing in 21, 22. Now inflation is at 2, so cost is not increasing, but the cost structure is still elevated. So doing business and making profit is tougher than before. Shortage of labor has eased over the last 12 months as the economy slowed down. But as the economy pick up again, we will face more shortage of labor. The reason is, the structure of our labor force is changing. A lot of Canadians are retiring at the same time, so there's not a lot of people to work. And that will come back in 2025. Finally, we see a major change in technology. AI is the level of adoption of AI is more predominant with bigger business than small business. So to stay competitive, it would be important to adopt technology. In a survey we did that we're going to release during Small Business Week, it shows that most businesses believe that technology change is going to be quite disruptive for their business. So the good news, the economy is improving and businesses are going to benefit from that. But their business development will stay challenging. Shortage of labor, the cost that has been increasing, major change in technology. So business will have to adapt to that.
Yeah, and I think the challenge with inflation as well, it was relatively short, but for 2 years, but the amount of the costs or the increase in costs for input costs, they don't come down. All we're saying is inflation is only going up 2% a year, but you've had that big jump, which does make it more challenging.
We're not going back to 2019.
Yeah,
that's for sure. Salaries has been increasing. The cost of input has been increasing. The cost of rent and buildings have been increasing. So this is the new reality. The good news is inflation is under control, so we don't believe these costs will continue to increase. But the step that we had to that we have seen is going to stay there.
Before we get, and we'll do some bit more Waterloo centric, but before we do, you mentioned a couple of things. I mean, the labor shortages and I think the scarcity of labor is coming. We see that. We do physician recruitment here on behalf of the community. More and more doctors are retiring, and there's less doctors coming in, or there's more demand for them. Either way you look at it, it puts strain on the system. And it's the same with other professionals, skilled labor. We know this from construction and the skilled trades. It leads to the question, and there's been a lot of discussion around immigration. We're a trading nation. Canada, we would not have the standard of living we do unless we're selling some of our natural resources, but also taking our skilled businesses and selling abroad. But we're also not. We need immigration to fill some of those jobs that are going unfilled. That's where our labor force is going to come from. But it does present the challenge of, all the things from education, healthcare, housing are challenged when we've gone through this period of upset. What we, at least from the Chamber's perspective, the Ontario Chamber, the Canadian Chamber, what we see locally is we can't get away from understanding that immigration is our path to success. But how do we kind of strike that balance in this period of time where, we do have a housing crisis, we do have shortages on healthcare and education, post-secondary, in other words. How do you kind of square that circle?
That's not easy. I totally agree with you. We need immigration because we are in this very specific situation in the country where a lot of baby boomers. They are retiring at the same time. In Canada, there's 3 times more people retiring now than 10 years ago. So that's why we are in this situation. And immigration is not the only solution, but that's part of the solution. I think if we want to continue to accept so many people coming from outside, we have to change the way we're doing things. For example, make it easier to build housing because we have a shortage. We have to do a better job to recognize the diploma that from people coming.
Foreign credentials and recognizing the education people already have.
There's so many engineers that are coming. We don't recognize their diploma, so they work as a technician. So if immigration is part of our growth strategy, we have to change some regulation or some way of doing things that we had for a long period of time. It's true for recognition of a diploma. It's true for housing. It's true for a lot of things. So it's a global strategy. It shouldn't be only bringing more people here. It should be a global strategy.
And targeting who were, more of an almost an economic immigration system where we're bringing in the people the skills that we need, construction, skilled trades, engineers, the professionals that we have shortages on. And that's I wanted to ask that question because we're facing all of those things here in Waterloo Region. We have, we're a very fortunate way, jokingly the center of the universe, but we are a very lucky part of the world. We have a wonderful community. We have great, highly educated workforce, 2 universities, a community college that are global leaders. There's lots and lots of business leaders across from advanced manufacturing to technology, insurance, finance, name it, we've got it here. Almost feels like we're more of a Montreal or Toronto or Vancouver because of the depth and complexity of our economy here in Waterloo Region. But what are the areas in Waterloo Region or in southwestern Ontario that you really think are poised for growth and to be the sectors that are going to create more of that economic rejuvenation and prosperity in the days ahead?
I think there's 2 sectors that are going to drive the growth, manufacturing and tech. Manufacturing is an important sector in the region, represent 18% of the economy compared to 10% for Canada or 11% for Ontario. So this is already a driver in a very good sectors like automotive, aerospace, food processing. So this sector has been performing well. For example, last year, growth has still been 2% compared to 0% for Canada. So the sector in the region has been performing better than in other part of the country. And as interest rate is going down, this is going to be a sector that will continue to grow. So that's the first sector. Second is tech. Technology is a very important sector in the region. And tech is, is the most growing sector in Canada for the last 10 years. And it will still be a leader because now everything we do, we need software, we need technology. So it's not only the tech companies, it's also all the other companies. We need to adopt technology to continue to perform. So this is one of the most powerful sector in terms of economic growth. So manufacturing and tech are going to be, I believe, the 2 leaders for your sector.
Well, and those are 2 of our powerhouse areas here in Waterloo Region, as you point out. And we're lucky to have Communitech and all the work they do with innovators and technology companies and startups. One of the things I think we've done a lot better in the last 5 or 10 years is integrating. Technology is not a sector unto itself. It's really an enabler for everyone else. So when you mention aerospace, auto, which is the auto supply chain, certainly, and we have Toyota here in Waterloo Region. But one of the things that it strikes me is in the auto space specific as an example, all of the investments in battery plants and moving to electric vehicles or non-combustion engine vehicles down the road, that's a real opportunity for us here because we have innovation is going to be at the hub of the greening of the auto sector. but you're still assembling cars and you're still building batteries and doing those things, which is essential for us. Is that area alone, because it does touch on climate, it touches on innovation and the new jobs of the future, what that sector is going to look like. That's got to be a real boon for southern Ontario and specifically here in Waterloo region.
Definitely. And what we are seeing right now is we're building the new generation of automotive, which is green automotive. There's about $20 billion of investment in green automotive just in the south part of Ontario. I'm going to London a bit later today. And, major investment in battery plant that will benefit all the province, also the country. So what is quite interesting and exciting, I would say, is we're moving into the next generation. We're preparing for the next 25 years how we're going to build cars, which are going to be different than the last 25 years. So these investments are going to have a positive impact on the economy for decades.
Moving on, and I think this is like one of the challenges that bedevils everyone across the country is housing. We have shortages of housing, and I really don't think there's a part of the country that doesn't have some challenges with
You're
housing.
perfectly right.
And it's only degrees of how outrageous the increases are, or the cost of housing in places like, especially, I guess Vancouver, Toronto, even our part of the world there's the cost of housing is escalating. How do we address it? I mean, I guess this is like, I always ask that question of everyone who's smarter than I am, because I think we have to put our best minds together of saying, is it all about the planning and getting approvals? Or is it that we don't have the skilled labor? Is it pools of capital that are prepared? But it seems like there's a little bit of everything that is contributing to us not building the housing stock in enough sufficient quantity for the population growth that we're seeing.
You're perfectly right. This is no one solution here. There's no silver bullet. It's a combination of issues. And interest rate was part of it. When interest rate increased, actually, we saw less building to be built. So the good news is interest rate is going in the right direction. So by the next 12 months, it should be easier to build. Shortage of labor is another issue. So attracting construction workers is important. It's important also at the local level to be able to provide permits for building in a faster way, in a more easier way, because it's not the only reason, but it's definitely one of the reasons why we're not building enough. And that's not only in the regions, it's everywhere across the country. So the different actors have to work together. All the governments have to work together to make this happen, because there's no easy and one-way solution. We need a lot of different actions to be able to build more.
Yeah, I think we may have to put them all in a room and say you're not allowed to come out until we have a set of solutions that from all levels of government and from business, for that matter, to make it work. Listen, labor relations, and we're seeing more of this in the news. We've had, and for some of it's labor disruption, others it was at the Port of Vancouver when they had the train or the railways were washed out. But we've also had labor disruption. Again, with CN and CP, we've had the idea of we'll have disruptions of lockouts at ports. These are devastating, because all of the goods that our members and that are either manufactured here or that we're bringing in are coming using those transportation linkages at our ports of entry. And I guess I guess I would like you to cast your, in terms of labor relations, where do you see broadly that moving in this environment? But also touch on how disruptive it is to the economy when you have a week or two of having the Port of Vancouver shut, or having a railway and having trains sit idle, is devastating to the economy, from farmers trying to get their grain, their products to market, to auto manufacturers, take your pick. it's devastating. So talk about where we're at in terms of the environment for labor broadly, and then how, why we need to be concerned about that, because those disruptions can literally change our standard of living.
Well, the reason is because we have a very tight labor market. Unemployment rate are very low. We have a growing economy at the same time. A lot of people, like I said before, they are retiring.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a more tight labor market than we have seen for many years. So that's part of the reason why we have these disruption. Unions are looking for improving the condition of their workers. So timing is good for that. It's because it's a market. It's a market for that. Unfortunately, I don't think that will disappear. The baby boomers are going to leave massively the job market because they're close to 65 until the year 2030. So after that, the economy will rebalance, or the job market will rebalance. But for the next 6 years, we still are going to have a very tight job market. So what is the impact on small business? Well, a lot of uncertainty. You have enumerate a number of issues. The Canadian government, I have to say, have been very quick to solve these issues. So the disruption was not that big, but the uncertainty was big, because we didn't know, for the train situation, for example, we've been talking about it for weeks. The possible strike at Air Canada, have been talking about it for days and nothing happened. But it does create a lot of uncertainty. But on top of that is the labor market is tight for small business as well. And it's even more difficult for them because they don't have the resources to pay the same salary than large businesses. And, salaries has been increasing in Canada by almost 5% every year since the pandemic. This is unusual. Mm-hmm. Now we have a slowdown in the economy. We shouldn't have, overall salary increase, and still it's increasing by 4 or 5%. So this is also very tough for small business, because this situation is not going to go away because of the level of people retiring. So for the next few years, the pressure on the labor market is going to remain. The pressure on salary is going to remain. So for businesses, you have to be very innovative. Investing in technology is a great idea because, technology doesn't replace people, but it could replace tasks, reduce your need for workers.
Yeah. So
it's a great solution in the context that cost is increasing, but also in this tight job market.
Yeah. So one of the things that I know you're probably aware of locally here, there's been a very contentious debate. Well, at least on some people's part, it's not contentious on our part. We've been talking about the need for land assembly here in Waterloo region for 13 years. We lost Schneider's, and I think it was 1,300 direct jobs, and probably another 600 or 700 supply chain jobs when Schneider's left to move to Hamilton. And the reason they didn't stay here was we didn't have a piece of land that suited their need for growth. We've been talking about the fact that Waterloo region does not have a large site to accommodate anchor employers. I mean, lucky to have Toyota, and there are some, but we're getting missed when global investors are looking from across Asia, Europe, looking where to invest. We're a very attractive market, but we've got nothing to offer in terms of land. So as you look at this, I mean, this is it's contentious for a reason. I mean, having greenfield that are for farmland, that some would say is if we don't have room for anchor employees that are going to bring the next 5,000 or 10,000 jobs, as we grow to close to 1 million people by 2051, most of us think it's going to be more like 2045. That's only 20 years away. When we think about the importance of not only our region, but certainly here, but other places having shovel-ready, assembled lands for global, significant investments. That as an example, Conestoga Meats is planning an expansion. They're going to put $800 million and rebuild a plant. They already have 1,100 employees here. Adding another 600. That's $1 billion. Pretty close to $1 billion going to be invested here. If we don't have those lands in this community and others around the country, aren't we kind of setting ourselves up for failure in the long term?
I agree with you, and I think we need to. It's getting more and more difficult to have land across the country. It's all, and I think we need to have a better balance. I'm totally for the environment, and the farming is also very important. But I think we have enough land to have a balance between all the sectors. But we need those land to be able to continue to develop because our population is increasing and these projects are for decades. When you invest $1 billion, you don't do that for a few years. You have an impact for decades. So it's important to have these lands that are available. And I find in Canada more and more, we don't support economic development enough. We put a lot of regulations. It's getting more and more difficult to do business. So I think we have to change the mindset because these jobs, these investments, they are creating jobs, they're creating wealth. Not only they're creating salaries, but revenue for the government. Mm-hmm. And with those revenue, we pay for healthcare, social service, healthcare, education, transportation. So we have a big country. We have a lot of land. I understand that we want to protect some part of our land for the environment or for farming, but we need to have a better balance than we have now.
Yeah, we have to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time, which is we can still protect the environment. There's always trade-offs. Doesn't mean it's negative or positive. It just means we have to make a decision about what we're going to do. But the bottom line is, and I guess I'll end with this one as we our last detailed question. We are going to be 1 million people, whether we have jobs, housing, or healthcare in Waterloo region, because this is where people are gravitating towards. And the only question that some of us in business are starting to ask is, are we ready for it? And are we going to be a place worth living? And I think those are really important questions. And from an investment perspective, we better have tens of thousands of new jobs if we're going to have 300,000 or 400,000 more people in Waterloo region.
And those anchor investments are important because not only they create direct jobs, but for the supply chain.
And which are mostly small and medium, smaller business.
Definitely. And one of the reasons why they want to come here is because there's already a strong small business community be able to provide, the parts or the services that they need. So those anchor investments, they have a great impact on the economy, not only because of the investment they're making, but, for all the impact they have, the indirect impact that they have.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and let's kind of get back to where we started as we wrap up. BDC has been organizing Small Business Week in October for the past 45 years, I believe. I think that's the math that we have. Maybe catch if you take the Pierre's crystal ball, what are some of the realities and challenges and opportunities for small business over the next 5 years or so? We've touched on that, but where do you see the small business community broadly and the work that you're doing to support them over the next 5 years?
I think the next 5 years are going to be easier. The last 5 years have been like roller coaster. Mm-hmm. We had the pandemic, strong recovery, high interest rate, then low growth. So the last 5 years, we have seen, very, very high and lows. Mm-hmm. The next 5 years are going to be more stable. Mm-hmm. In 2025, we believe interest rate, the prime rate is going to be back at 2.5%, inflation at 2%, and better growth around 2%. What is also going to change is the level of technology adoption. We have been adopting technology for the last 10, 15 years, but everybody believes, when we ask entrepreneurs, they believe that the next 5 years, they will have to change more than in the past 5 years. More digital technology, more AI. Mm-hmm. AI is very quick. We never experienced such a disruption in technology in the past. So this is the business environment is going to change. Good news, better growth, more stable growth, maybe less uncertainty, but it doesn't mean that there's no challenge. Mm-hmm. And one of the challenges is going to be able to keep up with the new technology that people are going to use.
Well, it's great to have BDC and all the folks like Josh and Kirk here in the Waterloo region to help our businesses through that. Now, as we wrap up, I always ask these, everyone that comes on the podcast has to answer these three questions, because this is about, we're fascinated with the detail and your background and sort of BDC's view on the economy, but it's also a leadership podcast about leaders, whether it's locally or you on the national stage. So I ask a few questions that kind of get at your journey to the leadership role you have. As you look back over your career, what would you tell your younger self if you could had the benefit of hindsight?
Well, I think I will tell myself to be more patient. I think when you're young, you want to accomplish everything at the same time. You get very nervous that you don't, grow as quickly as you wish. But, over time, you realize that being patient, working hard, of course, but being patient, I think, the things are happening, things are changing, and you cannot plan everything. So I think I would be telling myself to be more patient.
That's a good one. And over your career, I mean, we all get lots of lessons because we either make mistakes or we have successes, and we can learn from both of those. What's been the greatest lesson that you've learned in your business career?
I think it's there's always solution. When you're at the wall, or when you have a complex issue, or sometimes you have setback.
Yeah,
you find sometimes you believe there's no solution. There's always a solution. So that's what I've learned over the years. Just take it day by day when the situation is difficult, and you will find a solution. And there's always a solution. It's not always dramatic as you first think about it.
Well, that's what small business do all the time. What's the latest crisis? And we can't throw up our hands. Better start problem solving and working through the steps. So that's good advice. Okay, and finally, I mean, we all have things or events or people that inspire us to do the work we do. What or who inspires you?
For me, it's entrepreneurs. I have, I'm lucky in my job. I meet entrepreneurs almost every day. I meet people from different sectors of the economy, different size of firm, everywhere in Canada. And I'm fascinated about how resilient they are, how they face issues all the time. They are very dynamic. They innovate all the time. For example, during the pandemic, a lot have to change. Sometimes their business model. They have to sell online very quickly. So and their passion. They're so passionate about their business, and they're so resilient. So my great inspiration is getting from them. Each time I meet an entrepreneur, I come out very inspired by that.
There's always an amazing story behind every business. If you have someone's story of why they got into certain things and how they made it work, it is an inspiration. Listen, thank you, Pierre, for spending some time with us here today in Waterloo region. We always appreciate you visiting us and sharing your insights. But there's always more to talk about, so you'll have to come back, make a regular happen, and come back again soon.
Well, definitely. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks once again to our title sponsor, Manulife, and our presenting sponsor, the BDC, and our supporting sponsor, the Immigration Partnership of Waterloo Region.